how are you doing? Hope you're well. Hope you're all set to get some really good information from our great presenters today. More to the point, I hope that you're not feeling distressed and upset with all the things that are going on in the world around us. If you were, I'd fully understand it. But we have ways of remediating a few things. Today, it's going to be about security in your organization. As you know, penetration testing can really help you as a foretaste of what could be coming your way. So we've got that as our subject today. But here we are. Do you feel like you're putting in the pen testing effort, but not seeing any real results? Well, we've got some ideas and tips from our experts. More of that in a minute. My name is Darlin. I'm the chair of two great groups within the British Computer Society, which itself is a great organization. Hey, it's the Chartered Institute for IT. What else can I say about that? Well, as you know, if you know me, I will be saying a little bit more about that. But for the time being, I'll just tell you the two groups that I'm the lead of are the Central London and North London branches of the BCS. Total membership, I guess, about 6,000 plus of the up to 60,000 in the BCS overall. More about that in a minute. Let's talk some more about what we've got coming up. Well, right now, as you know, we've got our pen testing webinar. Then the next thing we'll have, there we are, is a question for you, which is, if you're a member of ISARCA London chapter, please read this screen. Please take a snapshot if you like. But if you'd like CPEs, you need to email admin@isarcalondon.org and tell them that you'd like CPEs. They will then check back with me to look at BCS records, validate that you were here, and then they will award you the CPEs. So that's how it'll work. If you're going to claim for those, then please do take a snapshot or make a note. That's what you have to do. That's for tonight. But what's coming up later? Well, we've got something else. Hey, of course we have. And that's in May, on the 9th of May. And it's about robotics. How can you define operational requirements in robotics? What does that mean? Well, I don't know. I don't know very much about it. But of course, I won't be able to say that after the 9th of May because I'll view it either live or else afterwards on the recording that we'll make of it, and then I should be somewhat better informed. Now that will have a Professor Anna Cavalcanti of the University of York, and she's the leader of the RoboStar Center of Excellence on Software Engineering for Robotics. So a truly academic lineup there, along with her colleague James from the University of York and others. So if you're interested in robotics and in learning more, do come to that on the 9th of May. Okay, but back to the outside world, today's world, and unfortunately a world that's very much real. And of course, pen testing and so on plays a role in this in terms of putting security guards around our enterprises and so on. But the topic is Ukraine, and BCS has declared its support for Ukraine and the IT Ukraine Association. I'm just going to read a little bit of the small print there in case some people can't. In spite of the grim events that started on February 24th in Ukraine, their IT sector remains open for business. Konstantin Vasyuk, the IT Ukraine Association Executive Director, spoke to BCS Brian Runciman about the nation's tech industry resilience, business continuity, and what help looks like. And so there'll be a lot of information coming up about Ukraine and about IT in Ukraine. And I know, for example, that our heroes this evening Rich and Andy of Risk Crew very much support Ukraine. And I believe, Rich, tell me if this is right, you actually have some Ukrainian employees as well.
We do, absolutely.
Yeah?
You're right, correct.
Great, great. Well, I know that we have some Ukrainian listeners on this call as well. So welcome to you too. And I'm hoping this or the recording of this webinar will reach out to Ukraine, and we will welcome people to join us in BCS and making use of some of the BCS knowledge and facilities in the future. So welcome to IT Ukraine. And that theme is being put out on the airwaves by BCS in other ways. This is a snapshot from the current BCS newsletter. It's an electronic newsletter, so you could call it the email from BCS, which is about IT now. And there you've got the mention down there as well. And incidentally, Computer Weekly have featured this as well, BCS's support of the Ukrainian tech sector. And there's another initiative of BCS is down at the bottom there, how to get more Black women into tech, it says. And that is another theme that BCS is keen about promoting and helping, along with many other initiatives that we have. So what sort of initiatives do we have? Well, in BCS, there are over 100 groups, including over 50 specialist groups, special interest groups, SIGs. And they cover all of the subjects that you see on screen there, right down to security, which is the theme that we're focused on tonight, but a whole lot more as well. And as well as those, we have got a lot of regional groups like Central London branch, like North London branch, and hey presto, that goes out internationally as well to Europe, Africa, Asia, and the US and Canada. And if you were to look at bcs.org, the website that we have, then you'd see much more about that. And of course, you'd learn more and be able to participate much more if you were or are a member of the BCS. So if you're not already, I do encourage you to join. Okay, well, let's come back to today. The pen test workout, 6 tips for rock hard apps. That sounds kind of interesting. Our personal trainers will show you a whole load of things to do with the right approach. That sounds really interesting. Attend this webinar and lose 6 kilos of ugly fat off your next report. Well, after the coronavirus, staying at home, working from home, sitting on your chair at home period, I think that's really interesting. Rich, over to you. Please tell me, how do we do that?
You're on mute.
Let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Good. Got it. Thanks. Thank you, Dallin. Thanks, sir.
Go for it.
Okay, thanks for that. Yes, apologies for the title and for the how to shed 6 pounds of ugly fat off your next report. We get fairly bored around here looking for themes and topics. Anyway, hello and welcome to tonight's what we're going to call a workout session. The object for our session tonight is to help get your pen testing in shape. That's what we're going to call this. And Andy and I put together a couple exercises that we think will help you get more from your testing. Bottom line, all right. We're using this workout theme because, frankly, so many of us go through the motions when it comes to this exercise of conducting penetration testing monthly, annually, whatever your routine is, and then complain about not getting any real results. And to guys like Andy and I, we understand those complaints and wanted to put together some helpful advice. Anyway, bear with us as we use this analogy to hopefully get you to change your perspective about this whole exercise. Let me, let me just make sure I know what I'm doing here. We're going to start with, start with the introductions. Let's start with the obvious. Obviously, this isn't Andy and I as the cameras can, give us away. But bit of a story here. Full transparency. Tracy, the risk group marketing manager, said it'd probably be a little politically incorrect to Photoshop our faces on the bodies of these guys. So anyway, Andy and I got together, and in the spirit of compromise, we agreed to Photoshop our bodies onto these guys' faces. Okay. So it's not our intent to offend anyone with this representation. The point is why these guys might be termed, I don't know, handsome, eye candy. Few people in the business are in better shape than Andy and I to give advice to how to get more from your security penetration testing budget. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to be your personal trainers for the night. A little bit about myself. For those of you who don't know, I'm a managing director of Risk Crew. We're a product agnostic, London-based consulting firm. Essentially, penetration testing is a core expertise. We've been doing it. I've personally been in the business for well over 20 years. That's why my hair looks like this. The key is that we're not tied to a product. We're not outselling product. We're outselling process, meaning the process of implementing penetration testing and getting the best for it. So is no sales tonight. This is nothing about sales. This is about how to increase the quality, and I sure should know how to do that, given that that's what we've been doing for a living for almost 20 years. Andy, why don't you introduce yourself here, because I can never do you justice.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm Andy. I've been in pen test sales and cybersecurity for just coming up for 18 years. So I've sold loads of hundreds of web application tests and red team tests, but predominantly, I suppose, the web application and infrastructure. But I also love getting my hands dirty on the physical intrusion stuff. So if you've got really good systems, we might try and bypass the systems by physically getting into your building. And I love doing that, whether it's dressing up as a BT engineer or as a flower delivery guy. But yeah, that's the fun stuff, I suppose, and getting my hands dirty and seeing what stuff we can legitimately steal from you. Obviously, with your permission. Never without permission.
If you haven't caught on, Andy's got a little penchant for dressing up there that we'll probably want to talk about offline. But what I do love about your experience, Andy, is that you got hands-on experience. So Andy's a little self-effacing there. He's actually, when he talks about dressing up, he talks about he's conducted social engineering. He's got 15 years of experience of actually delivering well-rounded penetration tests. So he doesn't just talk about it, he's actually done it. So between the two of us, we should be able to give you some tips. All right, anyway. Okay, Andy, do you want to kick us off here? Why don't you kick us off and go over the general idea of the workout?
Yeah, I suppose the best workout, as we say it, is comprised of 6 components. And this will help you maximize the results from your security penetration testing. You need to take the right approach, set the right objectives, decide on the right scope, the right methodology, the right qualifications from your testers, and make sure you get the right report. I've seen some reports in the past that are cut and paste from a Hollis scan or something like that, whereas you want a full detailed report, and that really is the great output of a great test, I suppose. So what we can do is go through each of these sections, and we'll talk through it. And over to you, Rich. Where should we start?
Yeah, well, good. Thanks for that, Andy. Let's start at the beginning. And to an old guy like me, that means, Andy, you know me, anytime I have to do anything remotely strenuous, I like to stretch first before I pull it, so I don't pull a muscle. Yeah, when it comes to pen testing, you need to start by warming up. Okay, so here's my first, my first piece of advice to you. You can't just jump right into it. Your frame of mind before you undertake a pen test project is everything. It's and it is a frame of mind. It's that eye of the tiger frame of mind. You got to take on a focus and a concentration that I want to talk about. Is that line from Caddyshack. What is that, Andy? You got to be the ball, Danny. You got to have that kind of concentration, become one with this project. It's not a project to do pen testing successfully, it's not something you want to focus on why there's 4 or 5 other IT projects going on. It demands your full concentration. And this means you got to start with the right frame of mind, all right? Otherwise, you're going to waste a lot of effort. And for me, the best place to start then is with the definition. Okay, and I know this is very simple, but I like to start at the very simple idea is, do you know what a security penetration test is? Because unfortunately, a lot of people out there buying security penetration tests don't know the difference between them and what's known as a security vulnerability assessment scan. All right, I know, like I said, I know it sounds stupid, but many people out there in business who are buying pen tests do not know the difference. So my question to you is, do you know the difference before you even start this project? Does your staff know the business? More importantly, does your business know the difference? You know, if I gave you 2 reports and one was a vulnerability assessment report and one was a pen test report, would you know the difference? So let's look at this quickly so we all understand a vulnerability scan. Okay, that's when a tester uses an automated commercial scanning tool, all right, a Nessus scanner, a Qualification scanner, as Andy said, and all right, and he literally scans IP addresses or URLs to identify what's known as industry recognized, that's vendor recognized security vulnerabilities, all right, like missing patches or you know, it's a known when it comes to security vulnerabilities associated with that URL or that IP address, right? It's an automated process, and here's a list of all the vulnerabilities. You know, missing patches to default passwords to just, you know, vendor vulnerabilities that have been identified on a vulnerability list. A penetration test, that's something entirely different. Okay, that's when a tester uses a combination of commercial tools and any generated scripts that, you know, he or she makes up on site or, you know, during the test to both identify vulnerability and exploit that vulnerability. Now, not just any vulnerability, but both known vulnerabilities and unknown vulnerabilities. That means, you know, vendor recognized vulnerabilities and hacker recognized vulnerabilities, which are 2 different worlds. Okay, so this is when a tester uses a combination of tools to identify and exploit both known and unknown vulnerabilities associated with a target, a URL, a website, or an IP address. Okay, but the 2 are very, very different. One is extremely passive, or just, you know, you're just running software, and it's software, and that software is going to send you a list of all the, you know, all the known vulnerabilities. That doesn't mean they can be exploited. That doesn't mean that they'll provide access to unauthorized access to the system. That doesn't mean anything other than those vulnerabilities seem to exist as associated with those target IP addresses or target URLs. Okay, so it all starts here where a penetration testing is extremely active. It's doing the reconnaissance, it's finding the vulnerabilities, but then it's taking it a step further and exploiting those vulnerabilities against an objective. What's the objective? Unauthorized access, or, you know, or data exfiltration. All right, but and by the way, you know, what we're going to talk about is you can exploit a vulnerability and it really not have any impact on your business. So maybe it's no vulnerability at all. And that could be a missing patch or a default password or some kind of cross-site scripting vulnerability. So it all starts here, knowing what a penetration test is and is not. Anyway, okay, Andy, what else? Where do we go from there?
Focus. You're right about this, Rich. You have to focus on the task at hand. And it starts with ensuring you know what you want. Is it a scan or is it really a pen test? And if it's a test, what is it you're trying to achieve with it? Is it to check a box just for the annual test? Yeah, just get the test done, tick a box, move on. Or do you really want to understand to what extent the systems can be compromised, to really understand where you might be weak? Because they're 2 different things. I can tell you the first minute of a conversation with a potential client, whether they're concentrating and really focusing on what they want from a test, and if they had the eye of the tiger, if they're focused on the outcome they want. Richard, earlier this week, we had a list come through from a bank in another country, and they sent us a list of 19 URLs, and we tried to engage with them on a scoping call. and they really didn't want to engage. On the list, it had 19 IP addresses, URLs. A few of them had API marked after them, but we didn't know if they were e-commerce, whether they're just a brochureware website, how the API interacts with the application, and from that we were tasked with trying to put a quote together. And it's a bit like, how long is a piece of string? We could quote 2.5 days on each application or each IP address and not have enough time to do a proper test, or we could overquote it. And from our point of view, we might not get the business because we've quoted far too much. So we really need to understand with a client and focus on what they want and get decent scope.
Yeah, it's an excellent example. If the client can't focus on it, why would the client expect the service provider to be able to focus and meet those expectations? Yeah, great example, Andy. For me, it's exactly that. You have to have that focus, and in that focus, you cannot assume anything. Now, we're stretching here. We're saying you got to focus on this. You've got to start to, and part of that focus is making no assumptions. This has got to be your default status. Assume nothing throughout the whole process. Start by not assuming that the testing provider understands what you want or why you want it. Believe it or not, few buyers do this, and this is why they get scans when they thought they were buying penetration tests. They made the assumptions. Okay, so in terms of getting ready to do your pen test, assume nothing. Do not assume that your supplier knows what you want, and you have to focus. As Andy says, you got to focus on what you want. Is this just a box check? And here's do something with these IPs, and then that's what Andy's point is, and it's a good one. You're just going to get a scan. But if the words manual security penetration testing are not explicitly stated in the quote or proposal you receive, you are miles away from getting anything remotely, associated with the definition of a pen test. And if you're reading things like a security assessment or health check or security health check update or anything that doesn't say manual security penetration testing of IP addresses in scope, all right, these are all signs that you're not actually buying a pen test. You might be buying a scan instead. So the onus is on you. You've got to focus and get that mindset that nothing is assumed, and that requires what, Andy?
I think really, I mean, as a purchaser of pen testing, you really need to be part of the process. I feel it's only in recent years that a customer really wants to get involved and be on a call with you. In the past, they might fire a list of URLs. They might put it's an e-commerce website after it to give you a bit of background information. But it's far better if you can have a proper discussion, a Zoom call or a Teams call. And that's what I had exactly today. It was, again, a financial firm. They want us to test an application fairly soon. So I had an initial non-technical call just to discuss how soon they want the test and our kind of approach. And then I set up another call it was just after lunchtime today. They put me on a call with one of our technical guys, one of their technical guys. He was able to run us through the application stage by stage with our guy taking notes the whole time. They had the Swagger files ready for us, so we knew what would be involved for the API testing, and told us what their concerns were. And again, not just dumping a list of URLs on us and just saying give us a quote. So it's really informed and it's helpful. And when it's like this, it's slick, and they've already had the proposal from us by close of business today. So it streamlines the whole process, and no one's left guessing, I suppose.
Yeah, that's it. If you're not part of the process, you're part of the problem, actually, and you're gonna be extremely disappointed. You got to be. It's a transaction. It's a relationship that you have to form with your supplier, and that's the real objective. And if you can do that, you can optimize every aspect of the test going forward. That is the secret to this workout, is this relationship that you have to form, this relationship of communication that you have to form with your testing supplier. That's the secret. As buyers, we are not focused. We make assumptions about what we will get for our money, and we are not part of the process. So ultimately, the outcome is always less than optimal. When we settle for this mediocre product that we're getting in our pen testing, the general quality of security penetration testing delivered on the market today is, in my opinion, extremely poor. And that's a fault shared by both the buyer and the supplier. That's our fault because of this lack of relationship. That poor quality of penetration testing is the fault of both the consumers because they're not demanding more and they keep buying mediocre products, and that suddenly becomes the standard for penetration testing. Okay, until we as consumers, I'm speaking of myself as a consumer, until I start asking more from a provider, he's going to provide me the minimal possible at the highest price, right? That's the market. And that is absolutely what happens in the pen testing market. And so the key is to optimize and make everything as effective as possible through a relationship. And maybe, just maybe, by asking for more from our pen testing providers, we just might get it. Anyway, let's get started. Let's go through the 6 components of getting better testing. It all starts with, as Andy said, the first one is the right approach. To take the right approach by first asking yourself, why are you testing? Why are you conducting a penetration test? What is the goal? Do you know it? How is this test going to benefit your business? How is this test going to benefit your customers, your suppliers, your partners? Have you thought that through? Okay, have you considered each element of the bigger picture before you go in and buy this certain service? You need to answer these questions in order to get to set your own expectations before going out to a provider to have them meet those expectations. You've got to have your own expectations on that, so you can expect what outcome you require. Do not assume the penetration testers you engage will know what you need. They won't. They're assuming you know. And it's this double blind. Their assumption is that you're buying the test. You must know what you want. So your first approach to testing is everything. This first step towards your pen testing provider is critical. It's that how you look determines what you see. You can't see the stars through a microscope. You can't see molecules through a telescope. All right. If you change the way you look at your penetration testing, things will change automatically. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, I think is how that goes. Anyway, your approach then determines your outcome. It's all up to you, not the testers. So, all of these questions you see here, they all come down to what are you asking for? White box, gray box, black box. What attack vectors do you want? What threat actors do you want simulated? Have you thought it through? Because the assumption is, if you haven't thought it through, you're making the assumption that the pen tester knows what to do. And that's a big assumption. And you're setting yourself up for a disappointment. So what I'm advocating here is that, before you even start, the right approach is to go to your little quiet place and light your aromatherapy candle, put on your whale music, sit in your full lotus position, empty your mind and meditate and come up with answers to what you want. Get your head straight, as they say. That's the secret. Here's, you want to get more, you want to optimize, start right there. Write down what you want. Write it all down. Start a dump document that captures all of your thoughts about what you need from your test, what your customers need, what the business needs, what's all of these things that we talked about. Okay, your questions, your challenges, all your hopes, your dreams, anything. The scope, the methodology, any tools that you think would be applicable to the technology, any qualifications, a classification scheme, or the report format. Think about it before you go out and buy it, and write it down. I call it just a dump document. Start this base document that you can build that captures all of your thinking on the test. It'll evolve. Okay, and become your focus point for the clarity that you require in your testing. It's amazing. It's amazing how few of our clients even bother to write down or document their expectations on the return for their test. Okay, anyway, So let me give you there's a tip I've got. Here's an obvious tip, and it's one very few of our clients do. We go in, we do a pen testing, we say, when's the last time you conducted a vulnerability assessment scan? Because that's just understanding where your vulnerabilities are, right? That's a list of vulnerabilities. That's not trying to exploit them. We know that. So, well, I haven't done that for the last a year, Rich. Okay, well, here's a simple tip. Conduct vulnerability assessment scanning and findings and remediate those, and then go out and get a test. When I was a kid, the reason I think of this is when I was a kid, I lived in a really, 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 really clean house. Okay, I was raised by my mom. We were single mother. She had no money, but our home was spotless. And the reason was because my single mom had to go out and take a job, and she's raising 4 kids. Anyway, against her wishes, she agreed to let my grandmother come in and clean the house once a week, just to help out. Okay, so that's her mother. The point was the day before my grandma used to come over, my mom would stay up all night and clean the house. And we'd all laugh and say, Mom, Grandma's coming tomorrow to clean the house. She said, no, because she didn't want her mother to think she kept a dirty home. And the funny thing was that this only served to up my grandmother's game, because she would always find something, and the next day our house would be cleaner than my mom cleaned it. Why? Because as my grandma had her own reputation to protect. Okay, anyway, you see where I'm going here. It's like, before you bring in the professionals to find the dirt, clean your house. That way you're going to get a better return. Let me use one more analogy, because I realize my grandmother's house cleaning analogy might be a little out of touch for a lot of the listeners. Using another analogy, before you hire someone to see if you can break into your house, doesn't it make sense to lock all the doors and windows and close, and every security device you have, turn it on, and then pay a professional to see if you can break in? Wouldn't that give you better return in terms of your understanding of the security of everything that you've implemented to protect your house? Okay, Andy, what's the next step?
Really, find the right objective. The next step is to determine really the specific purpose of the test. Why are you doing the penetration testing? Is it an annual requirement? Is it just to identify vulnerabilities? Because if that is, you can just do that again, like a Hollis or an Nmap. Or to most people, penetration test means, can you get in, and if so, how far? What is the impact of someone breaching your website? Can they get access to the system? Can you get user privilege? Can you escalate those privileges? Can you see information you shouldn't be able to see? Can one user see another user's information? For instance, at a school, can a student see another student's information, or one parent, can they see another child's information? Because that certainly happened at the school where my kids went, as we were amazed by. Can you change configuration settings? Can you add a user? Can you get admin privileges? And that's a disaster if you can do that. But can you get access to information assets? Which ones? Can you exfiltrate data? And how much? So what's the purpose of the test? I mean, the best example I can think of, if a client requires a PCI test for PCI compliance, but in the past I've sold web application tests, conducted the PCI standard, but not once ever asked, can we get hold of card holder data? Can we get into the card data environment? So make sure the test you want is getting the results you and to optimize really as well, Rich, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good example.
Optimize the test.
That's a really good example, that PCI example, Andy. I mean, to me, that's it in a nutshell. How can you conduct PCI? How can you conduct a security penetration test you need for PCI compliance without the sole objective is, can you get unauthorized access to card data? I mean, that's the whole purpose. That's the whole objective of the test. And yet you're absolutely right. I've seen hundreds of those tests, PCI tests that says, well, wait a minute, did you get access to cardholder data? It wasn't. But that idea of, you gotta have the right objective and state that right objectives. What is the purpose of this test? To get unauthorized access to systems, and if so, what systems and why? What assets are associated with these? Anyway, sorry, good points, Andy. Yep.
Yeah, and then we'll talk about optimizing. Get the most out of the test. Consider expanding the test purpose. Tell them to list all the devices that they find in discovery scanning, so you can check this against your asset register. Ask your supplier to test network segmentation. Again, this goes back to PCI testing. Make sure it's on a separate network, and just to see if the IDS actually works. I mean, ideally, as we're doing a pen test, the defense IDS should be kicking in and slowing us down. It makes our job harder, but we can see their IDS is working, and we will obviously ask them, Rich, to perhaps turn it off so we can complete the rest of the test. But it's great if it spots us in the first place. Can they get into file folders they shouldn't do? Are standard build policies implemented? Can we circumvent log records, upload or download files undetected? Can we take information off their systems and not even be spotted doing it? What about triggering event responses? And so in theory, we'd purposely try and set alarms off in the hope that the firm would ring us and say, is this you doing this today, or is this someone else? And we can say, no, that is us. And other times we say, no, that's definitely not us. So it's just trying to get a response and find out if everything's working as it should, I suppose. It's a good opportunity to have a separate set of eyes, look at the overall network integrity. And why would you waste that opportunity, I suppose?
Yeah, exactly. Why would you waste that? Yeah, that's an excellent point. Got a tip for us? Andy.
Oh, sorry, I lost you there.
Yep, sorry, you did.
Yep. After this is our training tip. After testing, review your logs and confirm they've identified the testing activity that we've been carrying out. They should be able to see what we're doing. The stuff, the tools we use, should be shown up.
Yep. Easy to do. After just, did anybody even notice the test was conducted? Oh, thanks. Okay, next step would be to make sure you got the right scope. And by this, what's in scope, what's out, do the IPs and URLs actually host target information, meaning do they host information assets? I mean, determining the right scope involves verifying what you want tested, what's in scope, but just as important, what's out of scope. Okay, it's crucial for a service provider to understand, yes, the target IPs and URLs that host valuable information that you're trying to protect. So give them a list of things that should be tested, but also provide a list that should be not tested, meaning document it. These could be third-party connections that you don't, or hosting provider. We get a lot of people that say, "Oh, test all these," especially comes on the personal devices, but not C-level. Knowing what's out of not C-level personal devices, for instance. Sorry. Knowing what's out of scope is sometimes just as important as what's in scope. But my point to you is both should be documented. If things that are out of scope, if there are things that are out of scope of testing, it's very important that you document that these were not included. Okay, so and anyway, once you've got a scope and you've decided this is the scope, this is not the scope, you've documented both. The next step is to check that that you connect the dots, right? And ensure that everything aligns to your information assets and your risk registers. Like Andy brought up the PCI testing, all right? Are these the IP addresses that process, store, or transmit cardholder data? You should verify that before you start the test, and that is the card data environment that's subject to security penetration testing. So are these IP addresses and URLs that are going to be tested, are they the actual ones that host information assets that you need to provide verification of the security integrity for? All right, you want to make sure people don't get unauthorized access to your information assets, so double check. And it's amazing how many times we've conducted full-fledged pen tests and says, oh, those aren't the IPs for that CRM or for that that platform that hosts this, our information asset. Another thing that comes up from finding the right scope is just this whole idea of where your network starts and stops. And that's why I advocate don't just document what's in scope, but what's out of scope, because it's a discovery exercise for both you and the penetration tester, that they understand, you want me to cover 365 or any IoT connections, mobile devices, any other technology that you tested for, but never assume that testing is going to cover your whole network environment. One of the things a really good penetration test takes a holistic approach to. You've heard this from guys like me and anybody else in the business, the people, process, and technology. All right, your systems process, store, and transmit your information assets, but they include process and they include people that connect to them. All right, I understand, so you want to optimize your pen testing. Consider including and expanding that estate as much as you possibly can that budget allows. Include mobile devices, include remote connections, include any authentication connectivity that you have, or commercial partners, third-party suppliers. I mean, this is absolutely the way the landscape is today, is the majority of attacks are coming through these third-party supplier connections and vendor connections. So they should be included. And if you can't include it, I understand you might not have the budget to do your whole estate, fair enough, but you can do it in increments over stages. Year 1, year 2, year 3, or better yet, do sampling. Include one mobile device, one remote connection, one authentication connection. Okay, and then take the findings from that and remedy them across all your connections or all your mobile devices. There's no reason for not to do sampling. Sample 5% of your mobile devices, 10%, whatever you can afford to get that you're getting a good sampling of the typical mobile device that's connecting to your network. Anyway, bottom line is if you omit significant portions of your estate, you should ask your supplier to document these omissions. All right, i.e. mobile device connections to the systems were not included in testing. All right, and what I'm telling you is that way you have a historical record of accountability. And this will be extremely useful in the event that you ever experience a breach somewhere down the line. Everybody assumes pen testing was, when did we do the last pen test? We did it a year ago. And everybody assumes, well, that was the whole estate. It wasn't. And you should be able to go back to that test and understand, wait a minute, we didn't do remote connectivity or mobile devices. So every pen test should become a historical record of, and that indicates what was in scope of testing and what was excluded from testing. Okay, anyway, I do have a word about social engineering. I have to, you can't have a pen test discussion these days and not address social engineering. I strongly recommend that you include some sort of baseline social engineering attacks in every single pen test you do. All right, your users are more and more are proving to be more and more critical year after year in terms of the vulnerability, or so things like phishing or smishing or social engineering attacks, to test the resiliency, the strength of your end users, and get some good metrics. All right, including you don't have to do all the staff, but a sampling of the staff, at all 3 levels: a C level, a management level, a staff level, certainly an IT level. All right, but the metrics you're looking for have to be repeatable. All right, staff, time of day, and attack methods, so that you can try it. You can do it 1 year and then do the same thing the next year and understand if you're making any progress, or use these KPIs, key performance indicators, to benchmark your security awareness program. But what I'd advocate is that.
Richard.
Pardon?
Oh, sorry. I like the approach where we might do a phishing attack, and then we'll work out how many people fell for it. Then we'll go and do some social awareness awareness training, and then a month or 2 later we go and do another attack, and just measure between the two.
Yeah.
And just take a just see if people, if they've changed their mindset, and that often works well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's why it advocates. But you keep the same set of metrics to test before and after. So if you tested 10 staff and 3 of them clicked on a link, keep testing 10 staff and look at that 30% marker. Whether it's
Exactly.
a month later or a year later. But the one final note I would say that a lot of people don't think of is if you're going to conduct social engineering, you know what? Tell your staff, tell the business you're going to do it. Don't try to catch people out. In fact, the metric becomes much more better if you say, listen, we've engaged with a third party. They're going to be trying to bypass our security measures. You don't have to be specific. So everybody be on your best behavior. That's the message. So if then you're doing some phishing or telephone pretexting and people are giving away their passwords on the phone, then you can say, hey, we even told them to be on their best behavior and we still got 30% of the staff that gave away passwords. And for me, that's it kind of solidifies the metric. You catch them at their best, not their worst. And that's a better metric for me. And it takes away any excuses, in terms of, well, we just had an off day. We told them that over the next month we'd be testing our security program. And these are still the results we got. So I find it really is a better way to do it, is alert the staff prior. Anyway, my training tip here is, is going back to this idea that what's not been tested in your penetration testing program is sometimes just as important as what has been tested. Okay, and that's for that reason. Our estates are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then every time we do a pen test, everybody assumes that the whole estate wasn't. And people are finding, you want to see the value of a pen test, look at your last pen test and see what the scope was. Because in the event that you have a breach, you will go back, you will reach out to your some sort of document that you're looking to benchmark. When's the last time we tested our security? And that's got to be crystal clear. Wait a minute, we didn't test mobile devices. Wait a minute, we didn't test these types of connections. And that'll be good news, bad news. But it certainly will be clear to the business and be clear to you as the owner of that pen testing project. Anyway, Andy, can you address methodology for us?
Yeah, I mean, really, you want to confirm the methodology that you want the testers to use. Is it PTS? Is it OSS, TMM? Is it NIST? Is it OWASP? Do you know the difference between each? And would it be applicable to your technology, I suppose? If not, speak to a testing provider. Ask what they would recommend for what they want testing. What we recommend our approach, I suppose. If you require compliance-driven testing, ask if the methodology will meet requirements. Remember again that the PCI example. Just make sure you get that right methodology. Get involved. We'd like to believe that every testing provider knows the best methodology and the tools to use, I suppose, Richard.
Yeah, we'd like to.
Yes. But do your research. I mean, it's in the best interest as a purchaser to do your research ahead of that, and then involve that in the discussion with the provider. Knowing the fundamentals will help you build a better, make you a better buyer.
Yeah, that is the whole point. So if you don't know what is the difference between NISP and OWASP, or the OS-TM, TMM, sorry, if you don't know the difference, ask somebody. The point is, remember, our default position is not to assume anything. So if you don't have an education in terms of what methodology is right for your technology, all I'm advocating is the right methodology is to discuss it with your supplier. That's the whole point of this, get involved. Sorry, Andy, I interrupted you as I'm apt to do.
No worries. And then ensure your SLA mandates the methodologies to be used. Not only do the methodologies identify vulnerabilities, but they exploit them. Make sure that any methodologies used have a process for exploiting methodologies found. Make sure the testers explain the methodology and the vulnerable register used. Also ask the testers to tell you what classification scheme they're using. They should explain the tool set applicable to each testing phase. And I've had it in the past where we might have, as a pen test firm, our own classification, but as a big company, they might have their own classification. So we might incorporate our findings from the testing into their classification table, and then they can map that across their own business. And it's also good if you can get the tester to come on site. It'd be worth it for skill transfer. Having a tester in your offices will give them the ability to show you what they found in real time. It gives you the tactile understanding of the vulnerability and how easily they exploited it. Also gives the tester the ability to transfer this knowledge to your staff and get this knowledge transfer. It's a really easy way to optimize the output from the test, and it will leave you much more smarter about the whole process. And if you've not seen pen testing, it's a good learning curve or learning exercise.
Yeah, there's nothing, there's nothing better than that visual impact of sitting behind a pen tester and watch them manually exploit a vulnerability and get unauthorized access. And step one, step two, suddenly, bang, you're in. And that's got that dramatic effect that brings things home with a lot more emphasis than reading it in black and white in a report. Yeah, Andy. What a tip for us, Andy?
Yeah,
I like this one.
For a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I quite like this one. I suppose this means that you should keep in mind that pen testers' capabilities can often be limited by the tools they use. You're hiring an artist, not a plumber. These pen testers are highly technical guys, aren't they, Rich? And they know their beans. Talk to them about the tools they use and what tools they use in the tests. They love to show off as well sometimes, Rich, don't they?
And rightfully so. The talented ones do, and you should. I like to let them show off. I like this one too, Andy, because this is an assumption. Everybody thinks pen testers are fully capable and in every single tool out there. That's not the case. That's not the case. There are pen testers who cling and only use one tool, and that's their hammer. And they just look for that nail that it's going to fix. But this is an important point, that every pen tester's capability can be limited by the commercial tools that they use. It shouldn't be limited by the creativity they use to address finding and exploiting vulnerabilities. But this is something that you should know. Are they using the right tool? Would you know? No. The point is, talk to them. Talk about typically how many tools would you use in this discovery set, in the exploit set, in the remediation, in the escalation phase, and just listen to them to get a feel that they got more than one hammer. Okay. Anyway, I like this too, Andy. I think it's a really important tip that a lot of people don't talk about in our industry. Yeah. Okay. So let's move right into, from tool sets into qualifications. Do you need them? This is, and the advice is, don't assume here, same thing, we're coming right back into this. Don't assume that the service is going to be delivered by the same level of testing you got from another company last year or the year before or year before that. Right? You should trust your provider, absolutely, but we recommend that you verify their capabilities. Okay, maybe not the certainly the qualifications, but this should be done especially as remember, the industry, we're struggling from a skills shortage. All right, so you want qualified people, you need to ask for qualified people. Now, qualifications are these certifications? Are these background checks? Certainly they've tested similar systems, but how do you know is my question to you. How do you know they have? You should find that and do the due diligence and ask the questions. Now, it could be as simple as, could you send me the CVs of the people who are doing the testing, so that you can get an understanding of their skills, their experience, certainly their certifications, and then ask the company, have background checks been done on these? In terms of their trustworthiness, they're gonna be coming right into your systems, into backdoors and what could be financial applications. So you do not hesitate to question their qualifications to do so. And you want to optimize this. Well, this is, the tester's going to have, all right, think about this. The tester's going to have intimate knowledge of your vulnerabilities. All right, so we certainly, we recommend minimum qualifications, meaning certifications and experience. We'd recommend, a minimum amount of experience. certainly what the best thing we could offer to you is meet the tester. Make it a requirement that you meet and talk to the tester and review your expectations, your goals, your objectives with them, and have them explain back to you about what tool set they're going to use and how it's conducive to meeting these objectives. I mean, that would be the optimal, wouldn't it? Why aren't you doing this? I can't remember the time, other than a scoping call, where people meet and talk to a tester, where you've made it, where any client has made a requirement. I'd like to talk to the tester before he or she gets started and get to know them. And that's a valid request. And I would get really excited if anybody asked me to. Great, you want to talk to one? That's great. And as Andy said, they love to be talked to. What tools would you use? How would you approach this? What's going to be the biggest challenge? What have you seen in the past? How has data been exfiltrated from this kind of technology before? Now, you might be opening up a can of worms and it might bore you to death, but the point is, you're going to find out if they have intimate knowledge, if they have the knowledge required to do the job at hand. Your testers, I'll go back to this, your testers going to have very sensitive knowledge about the vulnerabilities associated with your business systems. All right, it's like going to an analyst, and I cannot see why you wouldn't want to interview he or she prior to them getting in that position. Talk to them on the phone at a minimum. It's funny. If going back to this analogy, if you're going to hire somebody to break into your house, you wouldn't just take anybody sight unseen. You'd want to meet them face to face to understand their mindset, their approach, okay? And that way you can explain your expectations and, more importantly, understand the tester's methodology and expectations and capability. This has absolutely got to be the easiest one of all the things to optimize. Meet the tester. Okay, all right. My tip, okay. Experience is the best qualification. And by this, I mean that I've been managing security pen testers for almost 20 years, and they are an odd breed at best, okay? But frankly, some of the best I've ever seen were self-taught and did not possess any certifications. And I know that's not spoken to, but I would not hesitate to hire well, when I hire a pen tester, I look for creativity, I look for curiosity, I look for a problem solver, and of course, that hunger. Okay, and for me, certifications, are they OSCP, are they CREST certified? These are secondary for me. Certainly they show me that they've got a stamp from somebody, but really experience is the best qualification. I'll say this again, best pen testers I've ever seen come through these offices were the ones that just had a hunger and love to do it. So don't put too much emphasis on having, and certainly they're worthwhile. They are a stamp and they're needed for compliance. But okay, I think that's Andy. You want to talk about getting the right report?
Definitely. I've seen some shocking reports from other pen test firms over the years where clients have shown the report from last year's test with the firm they used before, and some of them are a mere cut and paste from a tool, and just not up to scratch. And so I mean, you need to ask, do you want a non-technical or a technical report? I mean, we certainly in our reports we provide both, don't we, Rich? We have a management summary, so the guy that's hiring us to do the test, he can give that to his boss, and in a layman's terms, in half a page and a couple of paragraphs, we'll give an overview of how secure the system is. But further down that report, be far more technical, so that the technical guys can go on with fixing the problems. And what format would you prefer? Whether it's Word, PowerPoint, Excel? Do you want visuals added? Do you need compliance requirement addressed in the report? What evidence do you have documented in the report? Do you need a certificate of compliance at the end? How many copies of the report do you need? So yeah, it's all things to discuss ahead of the testing. Yes, that makes a big difference. How would you like that report transmitted? Obviously it needs to be encrypted. would you like the findings presented in a workshop to key stakeholders? And that's obviously something we offer, Rich, as a post-test discussion. We can go through the findings. So that always works well for us.
Yeah, it's amazing how few customers actually come to this kind of detail and specify exactly what they want in a report. And optimization, Andy?
Just make sure specifically make sure the report specifically states the objective was achieved. So again, going back to the PCI testing, if you want us to get hold of cardholder data, put that in perhaps near the top of the report. We were able to get hold of cardholder data. The objective was achieved. Make sure the report provides visual evidence of the vulnerabilities exploited. And we always give clear advice on how to remediate any other findings. There's no point telling someone they're vulnerable here and not telling them how they might fix it. Obviously, we never recommend a product, but yeah, we might tell them how to fix it. And make sure the report states when the test was conducted and any changes made to the network, or significant changes made to the network.
So, yeah, can I just jump in here? I'd love to emphasize that first point. Does the report state if the objective was achieved? If you're hiring somebody to say, can you get unauthorized access to my systems? If that's the stated objective, does the report address it? Did you get in? Yes, no. It's a binary, not woulda, coulda, shoulda. It's a binary question that deserves a binary answer. Did you get in the scope of time that was allotted for testing? Yes or no. And if the report clearly doesn't state that, why would you bother with it? Isn't that what you got? You assign an objective to the test, and the report should upfront clearly state, no, we didn't get in. Yes, we got in. We partially got in, but to this extent. And when we tried to escalate privileges or whatever, but it should address. I can't remember the last. I can't remember an outsider's pen test that I read where that wasn't it. And I tell you, we do, Andy, press our pen testers for it because you're under time, you're under pressure. You can only do it in a certain amount of time, and you might come close to it. And a pen tester doesn't like to fail. They want to get in. They want to show you they can get in. And maybe they came really close and they spent a lot of time justifying that. But make absolutely sure that the report states if the objective was achieved or not achieved. Sorry, Andy. I think that's a big deal.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah. And the training tip, ask your tester to provide a video with a step-by-step exploitation of the vulnerabilities found. I've got a lovely story of this. A few years back, it was an agricultural pharmaceutical firm. A guy was sticking his neck on the line. He knew their SCADA systems were vulnerable. He engaged with us to do a test. And the last hour on the third day, we actually found this huge vulnerability, which proved he was right. But he wanted a video, so he made a video of us running the exploit, and he was able to go to his boss and say, "I told you so." And on that basis, he kept his job and he proved himself right. He proved his worth, and they were able to make sure the systems were secure. So in that scenario, it worked perfectly.
Yeah, it's a really simple thing you can do, and it's got that visual has a powerful impact can have a powerful impact on your stakeholders about how easy something could be to exploit. Yeah, thanks. All right, so here's the workout. We're advocating you take the right approach. You make sure you have the right objectives. Ensure that you've got the right scope, what's in scope, what's out of scope. Make sure that your testers are using the right methodology, that they have the right qualifications, and you get the right report, right? Okay, a lot of detail in there, but technically every single one of these components have to be in your contract, right? Remember, if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. That's the theme of tonight. If you don't ask for it, don't assume you're going to get it. Write it down and include it in the SLA to make sure it's contractually required. And that contractually the service provider is required to provide it, to state in the report, did you meet the objective, yes or no? You have to be that explicit. At the end of the day, if you have a dispute, it's all going to be settled by what contractually you asked for and ask the service provider to do. Okay, so it's got to be in writing. It's got to be in the contract. And the last thing I'd like to leave you with is, you know, it's not over till it's over. Once you have the report, the test is in your hands. This isn't the last step. All right, you should be looking at continuous improvement, taking the report and putting it in context, and then going back into the business and understanding, okay, wait a minute, did any of our staff report to social engineering? Were any of our incident response procedures triggered? Okay, you know, could we confirm the testing activity was identified, as Andy said, in the logs of the firewall or the activity logs or the IDS? You know, were any of our key risk indicators activated? Okay, reviewing these will help you see the impact of the testing and how improvements can be made year after year, from one test to the next, from one test to the next, and keeping on. It's far too many of these reports go in, you know, critical vulnerabilities are fixed or not fixed, and they're put in a pile. But they're not putting into context of the whole information security management program that you have in place or should have in place in your enterprise, and looked against the big picture and see the impact of the testing. And all these things that we're recommending, you know, that you're including in your testing, then pull back and take the report and make sure that, you know, if a tree falls in the forest, it makes a sound. When you conduct a pen test, it should have an effect on your whole information security management system, your whole ISMS, if you do it right. I mean, you can get that much impact out of it. Anyway, Andy, give us one last, I'd like this, and this is Andy's final training tip for us.
Yeah, this is something I was taught in sales, but I think you can use it in quite a few parts of your life. If you keep doing what you're doing, you keep getting what you're getting. So if I kept asking the same client, do you want to do this test again this year? They go, no, this year. If I left it at that and didn't ask, well, how about doing this test? So you need to change things up a bit, and you'll get different results. So for me as a salesman, I might ask, what else do you want? What else do you need? But if you're buying pen tested, listen to what we've been talking about here, and you'll definitely get different results from your next pen test.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Okay, last things here. Let me leave you with this just to sum up. Andy, jump in here if you have any comments. But the whole point here that we're trying to make is, you know, staying on our theme. This is not a spectator sport. You got to focus on what you're doing to optimize the value of your testing. This is not going to be, you will never get optimal testing by just counting on a service provider to do it. You have to get involved. You have to get involved. You have to know what you want and why you want it, and what the value is of this test to your business. Document everything. Document your expectations, all right? And ensure, and of course, make sure they're in the SLA, make sure they're contractually required. And understand that, you know, at the end of the day, what you put in is what you're going to get out, right? What goes around comes around. You reap what you sow, etc. Garbage in, garbage out is our point. Now, how would you expect quality penetration testing if you're not investing time and resources into working with your provider who's going to do that and communicating those expectations? You got to put some skin in the game. You got to be part of the process to be remotely successful, and then improve that process after each test, year after year, and continually, you know, attempt to raise the bar. That's what we had for you tonight. We certainly appreciate your sense of humor.
From my point of view, Rich, again, talking about raising the bar, I mean, I've sold the same application test with the same client year after year, but they and I might say to them, have you done an external infrastructure test? Have you done any awareness training? And it's always a no, no, no. So they think just by having a secure website, which is probably the key part of their business, they're secure. But there's so many different attack vectors for us and for the evil hackers that you need to think, like we said earlier, you need to think about the whole picture, not just a web application, not just your external. Any point where you think a hacker might get in, you need to test.
Anyway, that's what we had for you. Thanks for joining us. We've got some time for questions. If you've got some questions for us, happy to Happy to answer them. We put our, I think you should be looking at some email addresses. Do not hesitate to, tomorrow, next Monday, a week from Thursday, next year, come in and ask us, if you wake up and thought, I should have asked them something. It's sandy.wilson@riskcrew.com or richard.hollis@riskcrew.com.
Thanks a lot, Richard and Andy. That was a very interesting presentation. So yeah, please do type your questions into the question box. First of all, can you tell us about the penetration testing buyer's guide? Is that going to be made available?
Yeah, we put together a checklist in terms of a buyer's guide of all these things that we're talking about. Sorry, I think we're going to go ahead and send everybody. I'm not sure how it was left between us and how we would get it out. We couldn't attach it to this format, this webinar presentation. So either we'll put it up on the BCS or we'll send everybody who's attended this webinar a link to be able to download it. Yes, and it's a 4 or 5 page document that's literally a checklist of everything we've talked about here tonight, about all the ideas that you could possibly deploy to enhance the return on your testing.
Okay, we will sort that out and get that sent out when we can. The first question is from Nick. Would you recommend alternating or swapping between service providers to avoid the same tests being repeated year on year?
Andy, that you or me?
Because I only got half of it. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of distortion here.
Yeah, sorry. I'll take it then. So the question was, would you recommend alternating service providers?
Sorry.
Not year after year. I would have to come out of the box and say, okay, every 2 years. Fresh blood is good, but what I would recommend is that somebody say, because a lot of institutional memory is gained by, when we do a pen test, we get a lot of information. And that information is very, very valuable. And if you don't use us the next year, that information is lost. Okay, now it's not the repeat business, it's I remember that platform, they had this vulnerability, and I remember these were the assets. And so there's a lot of knowledge that sits inside of a pen tester's head and in his or her notes after doing a pen test, that one of the things I would ask, if you're going to change providers, you absolutely put them in touch with the people who did the last test, so that any sort of insider information can be exchanged. Hey, when we did it, we found this vulnerability, or this was their strengths, or these were their weaknesses. So I hate to see that lost. Having said that, I absolutely do believe that you need to get off a horse you've been riding for 3 or 4 years and get on a fresh horse. They'll give you a different perspective. But make sure that you don't leave one provider until you've gotten everything out of it. And what we find is a good compromise is that using different pen testers from the same company will give you a different, will give you a different perspective. And that way they can also share their knowledge with the pen tester who did it last year, and then and use that. But it's a different set of eyes with a different toolkit. And that's, so you can find a variety with the same supplier, even though you've kept it with that supplier for 3 years, but you've got to ask for it, is my, Andy, would you add anything to that?
I used to have a client that used to ring up and ask for one of the senior penetration testers to do the test every year. And she said, Ollie's brilliant. And she always wanted the work done over Easter weekend as well. So Ollie always used it as an excuse not to go and see his mum, that he had to work over the weekend. But like you said, Richard, he built up that knowledge. And so that the customer could go, can you focus on this part of the application this year? We know you know it inside out, so don't waste time testing the stuff you know about. Let's focus on these new elements of the application. And she knew she'd get a good service from us. She knew Ollie was a good tester. And like I said, Ollie could focus on the new parts of the application. So they get the most for their money.
Yeah, that's it. You just don't walk away from if you've been listening to what we've been emphasizing, it's this relationship, and to pull away from that and to lose that investment you have in a supplier who understands your expectations, who understands your requirements for everything from a report to tester qualifications, and you've got that rapport with, and then just before you leave that supplier, I would say, can you still supply the same service and keep it fresh? And have that conversation before you make the decision.
Okay, great. We've got a question from Michael. do you ever get pen tests that fail in terms of not finding any vulnerability? If that is the case, what else can the pen tester provide other than reassurance that your security is up to standard?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. I'm often, I don't want to launch into a story, but Andy and I were just talking about this in terms of, I've only done a pen test in 20 years and not found any vulnerabilities. And it is an anomaly. It absolutely is. But having said that, there are systems out there where the clients take such good care that they have absolutely zero tolerance for vulnerability. All right, so they're few and far between, but I have seen it. Now, I love that. I love the good news of going back. A pen tester feels very insecure if they can't find something. They want to pull a string and unravel the sweater and say, see, I found this vulnerability and I pulled it and I unraveled it and I get an exploit. But I tell you, some of the strongest reports and strongest tests that I've ever seen delivered were those that said, good news, we were unable to reach the objective. And here's why. We were stopped at this, we tried to do this, we were stopped, and this was stopped. And if you can, within scope, and you throw everything in the kitchen sink and not get in, that's good news. That's really good news. And that's a good report for me. I would, no, that's not the majority of reports that you get, is just a laundry list of everything that's wrong, but that should be put in perspective. So yes, I've seen them, and yes, they're good news, Michael. They're not seen like that. Everybody thinks, well, and by extension, by the way, what you said, if I understood your question, is does that infer that I have a secure system? Now, that's the problem. It would depend on the scope and the quality and the integrity. Did you check people, process, and technology? Or is it just you check these IP addresses? Because there's a lot of ways to exploit a system, rather than through the front door, like social engineering. And so I would always deliver any report that says you have no vulnerabilities. And that's also why I say, but you didn't check mobile devices, you didn't check vendor connections, you didn't do any social engineering. And why I like to put that in perspective of what wasn't done, so what wasn't verified. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you have any more points you wanted to go through, Richard, at all?
No, that was it. Just
I was going to say, just on that. Sorry, Rich. On the last point, it's the testing we do is a snapshot in time, isn't it? It's whether we engage for 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, or 30 days. If someone's got it in for you, if you are their #1 target, if they try hard enough, they'll eventually find something, won't they? I guess.
Yeah, that's a good way to end the this evening. Is at the end of the day, that's all it is a snapshot in time. This is where we were on April 24th, 2022. This was the state of health and the security integrity of our systems. That's not to say it's going to be that way next week or the week after or the week after that. And that is absolutely part of the context in which any pen test report should be seen and understood by the business. This is the general profile when we did the test. And you know what? Next thing, a week later, we updated a new version of X, and that brought new vulnerabilities. And that's the way technology works.
And we'll try and let our clients know of any vulnerabilities that, as they arise. I think we put out an alert yesterday, Rich, didn't we? That there's a new vulnerability out there. You might want to deal with this straight away, and we'll try and give clients a heads up, and give them the advance notice they need.
Well, thanks a lot for that, Richard and Andy. That was a very interesting presentation. So I'm going to hand over to Dallin now to wrap things up.
Okay, well, I agree. That was very interesting, but I want to stir things up a little bit more. So have a think, and if you've done penetration testing, sure, that uncovers a whole load of things. Do you have any stories about some really dramatic findings? Anonymize it by all means, but what sort of dreadful things have you found? And by the way, I'm going to open that to our audience as well. Have you seen or heard about dreadful things that have been found in penetration testing? Anonymize it, don't give names of people or companies, but that would be kind of interesting to know.
Well, Dallin, you know me, I don't kiss and tell. Having said that, what you can picture as the worst is exactly what any pen tester, not just us, but any pen tester has found. With firewalls on default status, intrusion detection systems on default status, laptops on with default password settings, file folders that say with open text passwords written in there, accumulated, administrative passwords that are password. I mean, it doesn't. I've seen it doesn't have a perspective when you start to do pen testing, because some of the finds are so astoundingly simple and scary that they don't register as anomalies anymore. Just how people, from it's culture to culture, people maintain the security integrity of their systems differently, meaning industry by industry. And I know, Dallin, you've heard me, tell the story about one of the most secure industries out there are the last you would think. Andy and I were talking about, one of the few pen tests I've ever seen where there were 0 vulnerabilities were the very first pen test that that was offered to us by an online adult entertainment provider. Okay, and this is not an industry that because they're known for malware and spyware and screenware. They're known for, you go to one of their sites and you get crap. Okay, but they have a zero tolerance for security vulnerabilities because of what they do, of what they sell, which is very confidential. I mean, what's your worst fear if you use one of their sites? That somebody finds out about it. That your mother, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, God forbid, your grandmother find out, that you are on their site. So their privacy is their business model is privacy. And it's an astounding thing. One of the most secure industries on this planet today is porn. And it's a very strange thing. Otherwise I've seen it all, Dallin, and I don't mean that as hey, I've seen it all. I mean that the stupidity of people of what passes for security it's not like pen testers sit around and say, hey, did you see that? We found this. No, what impresses a pen tester and what stays with a pen tester is that story I just told you, is when you get to a system and it has no vulnerabilities and you think, what's wrong here? And I told you the punchline for that. I went to sit down and we were going to offer the test for free. We did a pen test for this provider, and we found nothing. And then we doubled the time, and then doubled the time, until finally we had to go in and take the report and say, we didn't find anything. That's never been done in the history of all the pen tests we've done. And I looked at this guy and I said, what do you know that I don't know? And he answered me without hesitation. He said, Rich, on the internet, you're either my client or my enemy. And Dallin, I have not found any CISO that can articulate their cybersecurity strategy that succinctly. On the internet, you're either our client or you're our enemy. And that's the way they saw the world. And that impressed me. That's the stories that I stick with, is the people who get it right, because they're the anomaly, not the people who get it wrong. Sorry. That's you can tell how long I've been doing this. The ones I remember, I don't remember the trash stories. I remember the success stories, and they stick out to me like a sore thumb.
Right.
I remember we did, it's not as exciting as your story, Rich, but we did it's a few years back now in technology days. It was a major high street retailer, and we were able to manipulate the website and change the pricing. So we ordered the most expensive thing on the website, which was roughly a £10,000 conservatory, and we were able to change the pricing to £10, and it would have turned up the next day at that price. And if you're the criminal, it would have turned up and you'd have shifted it onto a different address straight away, and you may have bought it with a stolen credit card, something like that. So we were able to change completely change the pricing on the website. And then another high street retailer, we were able to order -1 LCD TV. We ended up with a credit on our credit card, and the TV would have turned up the next day.
Yeah. These are classics.
They gave us money for giving us a TV.
Yeah, we just had one last week where we got into a hotel booking system and booked all the rooms, and they couldn't book any rooms, and that means financial impact. And now that's significant to that company, because that's all without rooms, So we just book all the rooms in the hotel, and according to their systems, the rooms are booked, but nobody's checking in.
Yeah, we said it to another high street retailer, because you can reserve and click and collect. And we said, what if some script kiddie wrote a script that reserved everything in your store? So we said this to our customer. He went to his boss and said, look, we've identified this. And he went, it's never going to happen. And sure enough, 2 months later, someone with a vendetta against that store reserved everything. So, yeah, again, it's loss of revenue, isn't it, Rich?
Mm.
It might not be the end of the world, but equally no one else could buy from that store that day.
Those are the examples that, you know, the impact of the vulnerability doesn't get worse than that. And you can directly tie it to a loss of revenue, and that's, you know, and put that in context of the business. And it's funny because that hotel, when we booked all the rooms, 6 months later, it still wasn't fixed. It's just, and that to me is just, that's what people do. You can lead a horse to water and say, look at this, you can book, somebody can easily book all of your rooms. Okay, we just did for 24 hours and stopped you. Okay, fine, thanks for that. 6 months later, it's still there. It's odd. It's the pen testers' malaise, I think. It's depressing to be a pen tester, by the way, and do that year after year and go back to the same site and realize they didn't fix the vulnerabilities you identified last year.
We have one more question.
Go for it, David.
This is from Kasim. How do I become a pen tester? I am a cyber security assurance specialist.
I can jump here. There are great online, there didn't used to be, but there are some super online courses, and I would start there, Kasim. If you send me an email, I can send you and point you toward directly some free training to get your feet wet, and then I would heartily recommend you start participating in what are our black box tournaments, capture the flag tournaments. We have one every year where, you know, it's an open call, and, you know, we hide things on a system and see if you can find them, but capture the flag and then online testing is the first way to start. I hope then you took my advice where, you know, you could start pen testing tomorrow. You just need to get roll up your sleeves and get some experience. It's not the credentials. It's not getting yourself a GX certification or a CREST certification. It's understanding. And for me, one of the, you know, in terms of certifications, look at the OWASP certification if you're interested in applications, or certainly the OSTP, the OSCP, sorry, is another really good one because it's all practical application stuff. It's can you do it, not can you take a test and pass it, but can you actually do it? And that's what I would recommend you start to look at. But if you send me you've got my email address up on this last slide, you drop me an email address, Kasim, and I'll point you to some good, some good free online training to start whetting your appetite of where to start.
Great. Well, that is a message to everybody. If you're interested in pen testing and you can see the challenges there and want to overcome them, I've left the information on screen. Andy Wilson, Richard Hollis at riskcrew.com. Let's leave those on screen whilst we do our final roundup, which is thanks very much, guys. That was really interesting. And it'll be good to hear the ongoing story as you carry on, as people reach out to you and all the rest of it. For this session, we've had another person whose voice you've heard but not seen, and that's my colleague, David Grundy of London Central Branch. And David will be wrapping up the video that we've taken, and we'll be putting that on our YouTube channel and making it available to everybody who attended. You'll get an email with that information on. Remember also that if you're an ISARCA London chapter member, you can write to admin@isarcalondon.org and ask for CPEs. And finally, remember to look out for our next session on May the 9th and attend that. Now, you will have belong to one of a number of groups, but there's one group in particular that I want to thank, which is our colleagues at London South, BCS London South, who have participated actively with us on this webinar. and also, of course, ISACA London chapter. Thank you very much to you guys, and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. See you soon. Bye for now.
Guys.